Hi everybody, welcome to this special webinar, Think Small for Big Growth. This is Terry Ryder from Hotspotting, and I'll be introducing to you shortly our guest presenter for today, Kate Hill from Adviseable. What do we mean by Think Small for Big Growth? Well, what we're suggesting is that for people looking for future growth, need to be thinking about some of our smaller capital cities and some of our more important regional centres. As the two biggest cities, Sydney and Melbourne, continue their wind down from their recent booms, the growth is starting to appear in some of those smaller capital cities which previously haven't had a lot of attention from investors and from media. And also we're seeing some very, very strong growth in key regional centres. Last time we did a webinar with Kate Hill from Adviseable. It was one of our most popular, most successful webinars. Kate's a particularly good presenter, and she gets around the country with what she does. Adviseable is based out of Sydney, but Kate and her team get around the country. I've actually bumped into Kate in far-flung places like Perth and Brisbane and other parts of Australia. She really does get out to the coalface right around Australia and the major markets, and she has that hands-on coalface knowledge of what's going on. So I'm particularly looking forward to her presentation. When we did it last time, it was very informative and one of the most popular webinars that we've ever done in terms of feedback in a positive way that we got from people who listened in. Just before I introduce you to Kate, I'd just like to point out to people who are watching and listening that if you do have questions, you use the chat box at the bottom of your screen, type in your question when Kate's finished her presentation, and we'll then go to the questions. And also be mindful that Kate has a special offer for you today in terms of using her service as advice agent, and she'll be talking about that in detail towards the end of the presentation. So let's get cracking. Kate from Adviseable, sitting in Sydney. How are you?
I'm good, Terry. How are you doing?
Very well. I'm really looking forward to another really informative discussion about some of the markets around Australia that you like. And what I like is that we tend to agree almost 100% on the places that we think people should be focusing on right now. So I'll hand it over to you to do your presentation and launch the discussion.
Thank you, Terry. I am thrilled to be talking to you and everyone once again. We were just discussing just right before this all kicked off about that picture that we're seeing there in Ballarat, and where I was about a fortnight ago. And it just brings back memories of it being the coldest morning in 60 years. So I was picking my time to travel. But yes, you're right. I do get around a lot. We are definitely out on the road a lot, checking areas out. It's imperative for doing what we do. So more on that as we go. So yes, as Terry has said, we'd like to focus on areas outside really of the bigger cities, mainly Melbourne and Sydney. Before we get started though, I need to put up the obligatory disclaimer, everybody. So please do be advised the information shared here is very general, does not constitute personal financial advice of any kind. And I do urge everyone to please consult with your licensed finance and other property professionals to determine whether any of these strategies are suitable for you and your specific circumstances. So tick, moving on. So for those of you who don't know me or know us here at Adviseable, we are independent property professionals. We are property investment advisors. We are buyer's agents. We are development consultants. And our mission is to buy you the absolute best available investment property in the best available growth area. We do that in a supportive, independent environment. We have a very personal and client-first approach, and I must stress that we do not sell you real estate. It is not how we work. We've been working within the property investment industry for many years. We've helped facilitate purchase of hundreds of properties. And I just did these figures as a little update. In the past 2 years alone, we've purchased over 120 properties with a total value of over $46 million. It's a phenomenal amount, really. Our main focus during that time for buying these investment properties for our clients has been Victoria, Queensland, South Australia, and I'd say a handful in New South Wales. So the important thing to note there is that we are licensed in multiple states. We do this to give people a choice. I'll come back to this again as we go on. It's not a cookie cutter approach, what we do. We operate on a client first basis. So that just means assessing the client's needs in terms of risk profiling, area choice. And in order to give people an appropriate choice and make good recommendations for them, we have to be licensed in multiple states. So that's what we do. We are members of PIPA, the Property Investment Professionals of Australia, REBA, the Real Estate Buyers Agents Association, and also at the moment the Real Estate Institute of New South Wales. All of our advisors are QPIA qualified. They are qualified property investment advisors, and obviously fully licensed. So that's just a little bit of a background about us. I'm sure we're all dying to get started and get into this. So just a few notes before you get started. As I've said, we operate on a client-first approach. So that means understanding people's and buyers' risk profiles. It's important that you do that. Understand what your risk profile is. And what I mean by that is think about things like your cash flow needs, your preferences, your risk profile in terms of age of property, tenant demographic. Also look at where you're at generally in your property investing. What is it that you need from the property, from the area? Where are your existing properties, if you have any? If you don't have any, then you need to assess these things. Understand the importance of research, which is obviously a great part of what we do here at Adviseable. And I'll come back to that too. So, as I've said before, we stand for a client first, and then an area second, and a property third approach. And we just simply do them in that order. They are all equally important, but it's not all about just rushing out and buying the first property that you come across. It could be very inappropriate for you. It could be the wrong cash flow. It could be in not quite the right area for you.
Okay. Do you generally find, as we do, that a lot of people do start with that idea they want to buy something and start looking for something to buy online without actually having done those early steps of understanding?
First thing that you do is hit realestate.com. That's right, which I completely understand. But in order to determine, there are thousands and thousands of properties out there. How are you going to decide which one's right for you? I don't think that kind of you're just kind of going, I'll have that one. It's really important to understand all of those things that I've just been talking about. Your risk profile, what do you need cash flow wise, age of property, how does it fit into your portfolio, how does it fit into your goals long term? Not every property is suitable for every property investor. Not every area is suitable for every property investor. Part of our discussion here as we go on. But yes, Terry, absolutely. So this background work doesn't sound particularly exciting or sexy, but I cannot stress enough how important it is. I'll come back to that as we go through some of these areas throughout the presentation. Now, Terry and I will probably be able to talk for the next hour just about this next slide alone. We won't, but I'm just a little preamble there. Understand that Australia is not one single property market. It's crucial to really get your head around. It's not a case of when you buy, but where. The property markets are fundamentally driven by local economic conditions. And I'm quoting you, Terry, at any point in time, there will be markets rising strongly, some rising moderately, others stagnating, some falling a little, some falling a lot. I continue to find this relevant. Right now, we have Sydney and Melbourne slowing down. We've got Perth looking like it's moving into a recovery phase after its downturn. Hobart's still very strong. Canberra's showing signs and has been very strong price growth. Adelaide and Brisbane continue to be poised to enter into a period of growth. And most importantly, you should understand that the majority of the media don't understand this, and if they do, they don't care. They focus only on Sydney and Melbourne, and really what I find that they're looking for, particularly this week, is dramatic headlines and clickbait. I'm getting comments all the time from people, all the property markets in a downturn. There is no such thing as the property market, and I assure you that Adelaide and Brisbane are not in a downturn. Terry, go for it.
Well,
comment.
Everything you say is true. The points that I'm continually making to people with all my presentations, whether it's through webinars, live through social media, and in presentations I've been giving at seminars and property expos around the country, trying to emphasise to people that we have hundreds of different markets around Australia. They're all doing their own thing for local reasons, and we have some very strong rising markets. So you've mentioned Hobart and Canberra. We're going to be talking about some of the other ones today. Some of them, many of the strongest markets right now are in regional Australia, and they're just not getting any attention at all from media, because as you point out, media is very focused on Sydney and Melbourne. Most of our major media comes out of Sydney and Melbourne, and they tend to be very self-absorbed, and they extrapolate their own backyard to the whole of Australia and construct a scenario where, because their markets maybe are showing some price decline, that they assume that that's happening across Australia, and it simply isn't so.
That's right. So I almost tell people on a regular basis, please stop, don't read the media when it comes to the property market. It's often people who have no experience within these markets. Ignore what you read. They have an agenda. That's, I guess, what I'm trying to say. Don't be put off by investing because you've seen a program or a headline that is putting the fear of God into you about the property market. It's just not the case around much of the country. Okay. So understand the importance of research. Listen to qualified, independent advice. Please don't be persuaded by people selling you real estate. It's not independent advice when someone's trying to sell you something. Okay, so the reason we are all here, we are starting off our little area discussion in regional Victoria in Ballarat. Coldest morning in 60 years. But it is, as well as Bendigo, which is coming next, Ballarat becoming the strongest property market in Victoria. It's really quite phenomenal what's been happening there, actually. The city is attracting large numbers of buyers out of Melbourne, home buyers drawn by affordability and investors by better rental yields compared to Melbourne. Ballarat also appeals for its growth potential, driven by the strength and diversity of the local economy. And I can't stress this enough. It's its own little property market. Within Ballarat, there are several property markets, okay? Just comes back to there being no single property market in Australia, never mind when you drill it down. So we have great population growth here, expected to reach 200,000 by 2040. It's about 105,000 at the moment. It's just a fraction smaller than Bendigo. We've had, and we're getting $6 billion in road and rail upgrades. We have that dedicated line to Melbourne, which makes the commute into Melbourne very, very nice, actually. And people do commute. I think at the moment it takes about an hour, just over an hour. In the southwest and the west of Ballarat, we have the Lucas master planned suburb. We've had $460 million hospital upgrade. You've got the Ballarat West Growth Zone, which is a $30 million joint initiative between the City of Ballarat and the state government, which is generating thousands of jobs. You've got one of the nation's lowest unemployment rates. Also, interestingly, one of the lowest youth unemployment rates in the country, in Ballarat. 2 universities, a TAFE. You've got a lovely diversified industry here of healthcare, manufacturing, education, retail, and tourism. It's quite a strong industry here as well. So the 2 little charts that you see, the bottom right-hand side of the screen, one is a growth chart. I have relatively randomly picked suburbs here, but they are fairly indicative of the kind of growth charts and the vacancy rates that we're seeing here at the moment. So growth charts overall, when you average these things out over 15, 20 years, are very steady. You've got very nice low vacancy rates at the moment, but they tend to be in this area. There's always been good demand for rental properties. They're at less than 1%. In this particular suburb in Alfreton, you've got a median price of around 420,000 and a median rent of about 410. So the yields are quite good. I really like Ballarat. Terry, what do you, I know you agree.
Yeah, I like it too a lot. I like it because it's got its own strong reasons to grow. It's a very strong and diverse local economy, but it also is catching away from Melbourne, and that's a trend that we often see in cycles. Yeah. As the capital city winds down, some of the regional areas within striking distance start to crank up. So one of the appeals of Ballarat for people out of Melbourne is that you can actually buy real estate very affordably there, and it's commutable to Melbourne if you have a job in Melbourne, and there are a certain percentage of the Ballarat population who do that. The suburb you mentioned, Alfreton, is actually one of the more expensive ones. I think you'll find that most suburbs in Ballarat have median prices in the 200,000s, perhaps more commonly in the 300,000s for houses. So for people out of Melbourne, that's incredibly affordable. And it's just really attractive. And, you know, Ballarat in its own right is a great place to live. It's got a lot to offer. It's got a wonderful historic fabric. And, both for people looking for somewhere to live, working locally or working in Melbourne, and people looking for somewhere to invest affordably with much better rental returns than you get in the big cities, then it's really somewhere that people should consider.
That's right. I also think that markets like Ballarat, and we'll talk about Bendigo shortly, they're becoming more and more popular because I find that as people, and as I guess as our lifestyles change, the way we work changes. Not everyone is travelling into CBDs and big cities for work. A lot of us work from home. A lot of small businesses, you know, the way people earn their living and the way people are living their lives isn't about commuting into a CBD anymore. Look at us too, prime example. But, you know, and so markets like Ballarat and Bendigo are very realistic lifestyle changes that people make because, as you say, they can afford a very nice property. They can afford their own little block of land. They are surrounded by beautiful countryside. It's a very attractive lifestyle change. So this is also something that draws, you know, the home buyer, as I say, as well as the renter. And those are the people that are going to drive your growth, you know, as times move on. So without further ado, move on to Bendigo. Also a rising property market. It has, like Ballarat, its own inherent strengths because of its strong links to Melbourne. In terms of the number of sales, as I read in one of your reports just recently, Terry, it has 8 rising suburbs, as I said, in terms of the numbers of sales. So those sales figures are going up and up and up. The population also expected to reach about 200,000. We're currently at around 110,000. We've had an airport upgrade, or another $5 billion regional rail link into Melbourne, $630 million the Bendigo Hospital upgrade. It's phenomenal, that complex, actually. The city benefits economically from a number of major companies that are based locally but actually perform nationally. You've got a $1.3 billion Australian Defence Force contract that was awarded to a local business. It has significant retail and an industrial base, tourism, agriculture, forestry. Mining also still important in this economy here. Has significant education sector, has the Bendigo Regional Institute of TAFE, which has 11,000 students enrolled, and the Bendigo campus of La Trobe Uni with about 5,000 students enrolled. Again, very nice growth charts there, as you can see bottom right, very steady, very nice low vacancy rates. I've put the median price at around 310 with a median rent of about 300. Now, again, you can spend more than that. You can also spend less. They're very diverse, these markets, both Ballarat and Bendigo, I find. Bendigo, again, it's a popular spot for people who are commuting into Melbourne. They tend to live just slightly south of the cities, those vital 10 minutes of not having to drive through it. But again, very nice surrounds. It is very attractive to people commuting into Melbourne. Terry, any other comments about Bendigo? We love it.
Yeah, for similar reasons to Ballarat, that in many ways they have similar qualities, I suppose, but they're different cities. They have the big kicker for Bendigo recently has been that hospital project.
Yeah.
The regional rail has helped.
Mm.
What stands out for me is that it seems to be a little bit behind Ballarat in the cycle. I think Ballarat got on the growth path first. So if people are looking at Ballarat and feel it's already pretty hot there, and there's been some reasonable price growth already, Bendigo is I think, just getting started. So it might be a little bit less competitive, and the pricing a little bit more attractive because it's a little bit further back in the cycle compared to Ballarat.
Yeah. And again, I was told by numerous people when I was actually there, and we talked about the people from Melbourne moving to the area, that they tend to commute still by car. It is very drivable, and they prefer to, it's an hour and 20 minutes apparently. And they prefer to drive at the moment than catch the train, which can take a little bit longer.
It depends where in Melbourne they're heading to. I think it's important to keep telling people that the majority of the jobs are not in the CBD. That's true of our capital cities. Most of them are in the suburbs, big suburban jobs nodes. And the north of Melbourne has some absolutely massive jobs nodes, lining the ring road. So a lot of the people coming from the north, like places like Bendigo and some of the lifestyle towns in between, aren't necessarily heading for the CBD. They're heading for some of those northern Melbourne jobs nodes.
Yes, that's right. And I think we saw that too in the growth in the suburbs such as Geelong, Werribee, areas that we talked about earlier on this year. Phenomenal growth that there's been there. I'd argue that perhaps in Wyndham, Werribee, there's a little bit of there's legs left in those markets, for similar reasons. So great access to jobs around this side of Melbourne. I really feel that it's coming into its own this year. That that this sort of western belt, if you like, and pushing out to Ballarat and Bendigo.
Yeah.
Okay, moving swiftly on. We are sort of going around the country anti-clockwise, I guess. So Newcastle. I do still like this market. It has had some pretty good growth in the last couple of years as Sydney boomed, as we all know. These things radiate out, as I say, towards the Central Coast, towards Melbourne, down to Wollongong out. But Newcastle has for many years been such a steady performer. It reinvented itself, as I've said here, from coming from very heavy industry into a more service style economy. We've got a population there of approximately 160,000, which is forecast to grow to over 200,000 by 2041. It is the eighth largest city in Australia. It's also renowned as the world's largest coal export port. We have gorgeous beaches in that city, and not to be forgotten just from a lifestyle perspective. And this major transformation that I was just talking about has seen a growth in the knowledge industries, expansion of the health industry, higher education. We've got research centres, defence industries, professional and technical services. It's really come a long way, Newcastle. Again, a very affordable alternative to Sydney in the same way that we've seen Ballarat and Bendigo for Melbourne. We have Newcastle to Sydney. It is also the target for massive spending on infrastructure. There's new developments going on, revitalisations of the CBD, lots and lots going on in Newcastle. Vacancy rates still nice and low. Median prices are obviously up there a little bit, but again, when you compare it with Sydney, it's still considered a very affordable market where you can pick up properties for less than 600,000. The median rents roughly 420,000. So the comment I would make there is just watch your cash flows. This would not be for everyone, especially if you're purchasing perhaps a slightly older property. Obviously, there are newer estates and newer developments here. But if you're heading into the sort of the Waratah, Mayfield, or those more inner suburbs, you tend to be looking at something that's a property that's a little bit older. So couple that with a slightly lower rent, and your cash flow you're going to be contributing quite a lot in terms of a negative cash flow there. But again, a very solid and strong market that, again, I don't see slowing down really. It's a very steady performer, Terry, is Newcastle. always has been.
It is, and we would say similar things about Newcastle that we've said about Ballarat and Bendigo. It's a very strong regional city in its own right, and it has reasons to grow, which are totally about Newcastle itself, but also catching away from Sydney, people out of Sydney looking at the prices there and finding them very attractive relative to those in Sydney. As you mentioned, Newcastle's already had some pretty strong growth. In fact, some of the growth numbers I've seen, you could argue that it's been one of the top 2 or 3 markets in Australia in the last 12 and 18 months in terms of price growth. And if people get to that market, have a look around and think, well, it's already had substantial growth, well, it's starting to ripple out into the nearby Hunter region. So there's so we're talking about locations such as Cessnock and Maitland and Rutherford, and further out to Singleton. In some ways, they're outer suburbs of Newcastle, but a part of that wonderful Hunter region where you've got, again, that economic diversity that we look for, whether you've got resources and energy, but you've also got tourism, the wine industry, the horse breeding industry, all sorts of things going out on in that economy. Prices are lower than in Newcastle itself, so it's affordable from a attractive from an affordability viewpoint, but starting to grow in its own right and also catching the wave from Newcastle.
Yes, agreed. So I do consider this, as I said, a very steady performer and always worthy of consideration if you're looking for markets outside of Sydney. Okay. Moving swiftly on up to lovely sunny Queensland. I continue to like Moreton Bay area. We are approximately a 40-minute drive from Brisbane CBD, directly north, and the Port of Brisbane, about 20 minutes or so from the airport on a good day. Our shire has a population of approximately 367,000. It's a significant council area. The area is identified by state government as a principal regional activity centre for major growth. It's a key growth corridor with very solid economic fundamentals. The local council are working hard to increase local job opportunities. So, and what I mean by that really is that at the moment, a lot of people are working outside of that area. So they commute into Brisbane to those job nodes that we were just talking about. So local council are working very hard, encouraging commercial investments in the area so that people don't have to commute into the city and create more of a work-life balance. So if they do commute though, we have that brand new train line. It segments off at around Peatree and goes round to Redcliffe and Kippa-Ring. Which has vastly improved people's commutes into the city. And I'm told by very many reliable sources, people do use it. So it stops that gridlock around that Rothwell roundabout. So very popular area for families seeking a better lifestyle outside of that Brisbane CBD and a more affordable one. I really like this area. It is very diverse in terms of its demographic. You are looking at young families, slightly older families, professional couples, perhaps an older demographic, people downsizing. I like the mix of people who live up here, Terry.
Yeah. I mean, it is diverse, and actually it's very big. And I think it's worth pointing out to people who come from other cities, cities like Melbourne and Sydney, and some of our other capital cities have many dozens of different local government areas, but the whole of the Brisbane metropolitan area is covered by just 5 council areas. They have very large local government areas, and Moreton Bay does cover a very big area of northern Brisbane. Looking at the map, locations on that map that are include Redcliffe, North Lakes, Burpengary, Moray Field, Caboolture, and then out to the right there, heading towards Bribie Island, Ballarat and Wongaree. And there was a lot of diversity there. On the Redcliffe Peninsula alone, you've got suburbs with median house prices in the 400,000s, and then you've got the sort of canal-based suburbs where the median price may be 800,000. So you've got that sort of diversity. North Lakes is a master plan community with, and it's a work in progress. It's been underway for 15 or 20 years, and it's still going on. Whereas Caboolture are older, cheaper, perhaps more down market areas, but with very good infrastructure. So there's all of those things in play, and I guess there's something for everybody in that market.
That's right. That's absolutely right. So you're not constrained by budgets. In terms of property type, you can be quite diverse there. There's areas where I'd say we absolutely must buy a 4-bedroom, 2-bathroom house on 600 square metres of land, because that's just what you get in those areas. Moreton Bay is not like that. So again, it attracts a diverse demographic, and therefore you have a bigger, I guess, a bigger choice of the kind of properties you can buy. I also like it because of it's certainly the Redcliffe Peninsula. If we go up towards Deception Bay, Rothwell, as you say, North Lakes, because we are finite in how that area can develop. Zoning changes have happened there in the past couple of years because there's nowhere, they can't expand outwards, so they're going to have to go upwards to cater for this population growth. So that's another reason I really like it. The facilities there are fantastic. We have Queensland's second IKEA here. We have Costco here, hospitals. It's everything to cater for this growing population.
And of course, the new university campus that's going to go around the Petrie area, which is going to be a generator of activity and rental demand.
That's right. So again, really nice low vacancy rates. It pays to sort of know what you're doing in this area, that because of the different property types, I find that the different property types actually move in different cycles to each other as well. When you've got 4-bedroom, 3-bedroom houses, they tend to grow in different cycles. So, and the area, again, to me, it's quite steady. The growth chart is a little, when you look at it again, average it out overall, it's a very good steady performer with some pretty good yields. So it wouldn't cost a lot to hang on to properties in this area.
One of the things that's worth pointing out there, I think, Kate, because a lot of investors these days are looking for more than passive investment. They're looking for opportunities to add value, perhaps do small developments. And I know that areas like Deception Bay do have opportunities where if you buy property with the right land size and zoning, you do have the potential to redevelop, as well as having an existing house that's rentable, providing an income until you're ready to do that. Yeah. It's useful to have a buyer's agent like yourself on board to actually sniff out those opportunities. Yeah. You need to know what to look for and where to look.
You do. The where to look is obviously crucial, especially in as much as you've mentioned Deception Bay. You'd really want to be doing your figures quite carefully there, just because of where that market is at in terms of your end value and whether that kind of thing is actually viable now.
Yeah.
With your obviously your purchase of the land, your development costs, etc. So definitely worth a look though within this Moreton Bay. It's one of those areas where developments can be very, very viable. Yeah, agreed, Terry. Right, moving on from Moreton Bay, heading further a little bit north up to the Sunshine Coast. Again, I continue to like this market a lot. We are in Australia's 10th largest city here. The Sunshine Coast Council is a rapidly growing residential and tourist region, has been twice independently ranked as the second highest performing regional economy in the state. Significant investment in the region with many infrastructure projects already complete or still underway. What I particularly like and what's drawn my attention to this area in the past year, I'd say year and a half, is the fact that local industries have broadened over the past decade with growth in new industries like healthcare, education, professional services, etc. That new hospital complex around Virginia is phenomenal. A massive employer for that region. I think 5,000 people are employed there at the moment, and it's still growing. They are still developing. They are still building more medical centres. You've got the university there. In Sippy Downs, you've got the UE headquarters there, you've got some major employers in the region. It is not an area that is purely reliant on tourism anymore. I think what the council have done there and what's happened in this area is wonderful, actually, to grow this area in such a progressive way. The vacancy rates are low. Most suburbs have a vacancy rate of less than 2%. It is a very stable area, and to me continues to have really good growth potential. I've picked out Sippy Downs there. It's, again, we're looking at a median house price of around 495. I'd say you probably need to spend a little bit more than that for just the right property there that will appeal to tenants. But you will find generally you're getting around about a 5% rent yield at the moment. And in that price range, I think that's extraordinary around the country, the fact that the yields are so good. And you've got all this great growth potential. I love the Sunshine Coast as for investment.
I love it here. I love it too, and that's why I live in the area.
I know.
I'm up in the hills and the hinterland.
Yeah.
There was a time in the past, in terms of the hotspotting reports, we actually had the Sunshine Coast included in our no-go zones report because it was essentially a tourism economy.
Yeah.
This wasn't showing growth, and it went through bouts of oversupply. But
that's right.
The factors that you have talked about, such as the evolution of that amazing medical precinct, based on a $2 billion hospital and the other things that sprang up around it, has helped to broaden the economy. And the total infrastructure spend that's currently underway, there is more than $20 billion. The airport, the motorway, there's a new CBD being built for Maroochydore. It's quite massive for a city of this size, and it's just making it a real city, not just a tourist resort. And that's the important thing to bear in mind in terms of the property market.
That's right. And I think one that sets it, everything that you've just said, how that sets it apart totally and utterly from a market like the Gold Coast, which is still very much reliant on tourism. We had a little kick there of the Commonwealth Games, but the Sunshine Coast is an entirely different beast that I am comfortable buying for my investor clients in this area, which I wouldn't be in the Gold Coast, quite frankly.
Yeah.
Okay, moving on, just mindful of the time so we get through it all. Heading 5 hours by plane, direction west over to Perth. So I did want to include Perth in our discussion and in this presentation. We feel, I know Terry and I, we agree, you and I agree on this, it's definitely showing signs of recovery. I like this particular area in Perth simply because we're quite close to the action. Now, traditionally, I'm a great one for saying just because you're close to the CBD doesn't make it a great growth area, and I stand by that. But when you can get this close to major job nodes within the city and the airport, even Fremantle down to the port, I think it's worth a look. It's the largest LGA in the state, actually, the city of Stirling, with a population of 220,000. It's the second largest employment area in WA, one of the steadiest precincts during this Perth market downturn in the past few years. We've got the $100 million Scarborough Beach redevelopment, $500 million Carrinyup shopping centre expansion, the Westfield Innaloo shopping centre expansion. I think I said this last time, actually, Terry, that when I was here, and I saw you, didn't I, in April, everywhere you go, all the shopping centres have been expanded. They're really catering for that upcoming.
Yeah, I think that's really significant that while Perth has been going through this downturn, the owners and developers of the big retail centres have actually been putting a lot of money in there because they think very long term. They do a lot of research and they understand that it's a cyclical thing. Exactly. That Perth traditionally is very, very strong and it's coming back into a position of strength. So they've been pouring hundreds of millions of dollars into expanding shopping centres. That's happening right across the Perth metro area.
Yes, that's right. You've got really good shopping facilities, education facilities. You've got 3 tertiary institutions here. The Central TAFE, you've got ECU campus, Swan TAFE, a major hospital, a major private hospital, as I've just said, 3 major retail centres. It's a precinct that has seen some growth in the past few years. Some of the high-priced suburbs seeing rises in median prices. But it remains very affordable here. Again, considering how close you are to the CBD, you'd be able to pick up a 3-bedroom house here for, let's say, between $340 and $360. And the median rent, again, is probably about $300. You'd get more than that for, a well-bought property in good condition. The other thing to note here is the way the vacancy rates have come down here. I'd say a good 1.2% in the past 4, 5, 6 months. So that is a very good sign. People moving into the area, we're definitely seeing, I do hesitate to say the word definitely, but I did, didn't I? But we are seeing those signs of recovery in everywhere. Commercial vacancies coming down, residential vacancies coming down, as we just said, the expansions of the shopping centres. So I like this area a lot for its affordability, again, access to jobs. Your tenants and your buyers, they will find work here. They have good facilities. So it's very popular. So, and then we are going to move very slightly north up to Joondalup. Population of around 154,000. And this, as I've said before too, is one of Perth's steadiest property markets throughout this downturn. The properties have held their values. We're looking at a slightly higher than average median age here, around 40. The national average is around 37, 38. Again, you've got very strong amenities here and services, good road and rail links into the CBD. You've got homes priced in the range 1 or 2 tiers above the bottom end, again, reflected in that median age range that we get here. This area is recognised by the WA state government as the main strategic metropolitan centre in northern Perth, and it's a major driver of economic growth in this area. Massive big shopping centre here. Again, you've got ECU campus, School of Medical Health and Sciences, and a TAFE college. It's a really massive campus when you go up here. It's and really lovely, great modern facilities. Lots going on. It's one of those areas that when you go there, you can sort of sense the vibe, the economic vibe here. You do have a high level of home ownership here, so which can lead to good price growth, but I would say also slightly increased risk of vacancy rates, just because the demand can be slightly less. You sometimes get a bit of a higher turnover of tenants because they are saving to buy their own house, but nevertheless there is a good demand for rental properties. While it's still a developing area, new housing starts are lower than we look at in Wanneroo a little bit further up. And again, vacancy rates are coming off quite a high, but they're coming down. Again, median house price slightly high there, 450,000, but the yield is quite good at around 420 a week. A very steady performer, really good diverse local economy, and good links into Melbourne and the CBD, where a lot of people do work, even though the local employment opportunities are also really, really good. Terry.
Yeah. But I guess if you're living in that Joondalup area, a less reason to be heading to the Perth CBD, because Joondalup's got a CBD all of its own. Yeah. This is kind of like a Liverpool within the context of Sydney. You've got a mini CBD, transport, all the things that you mentioned. The other thing about that market, it is one of those areas where you can find value-adding opportunities. You can find properties where if you've got the right zoning and land size, you can build extra dwellings on the property that you buy. Again, it's handy to have a buyer's agent sniffing out those opportunities for you.
And again, from a lifestyle perspective, people like it here because you have those access to those lovely beaches too. So not to be underestimated. Okay, we say goodbye to Perth and we move back round down to South Australia. So I think worthy of consideration, I've combined 2 council areas into one here, which is Playford City and Salisbury City. So Salisbury is the 4th largest economy in South Australia. I have focused here a little bit on Salisbury, but the 2 are next to each other, literally 5-10 minutes drive away from each other. Established infrastructure in Salisbury, a good skilled workforce, diverse, thriving economic base, despite what you might read in the papers. And overall, it offers really a good affordability of doing business. So Salisbury is home to around 30% of Australia's growing multi-billion-dollar defence industry, has also good access to it of what's happening in Port Adelaide. It is a hub for other key industry sectors, including logistics, food, high-value manufacturing, water technologies. The area is exceptionally well serviced by road and rail. We've got port facilities, land availability, community infrastructure. There is the construction of the multi-million-dollar Northern Connector, which will transform the transportation networks and enable even better access to Adelaide CBD for those that are travelling in. So yes, the automotive sector has closed, but they had been planning for that over years. New job opportunities in all these other industries are emerging. Housing is very, very affordable. And the rental yields are also very good. We're looking at a median house price of around 273,000 and a median rent of around 310. That is going to, again, come down to the property type, the age of the property, where it is, etc. Very lovely low vacancy rates, very consistent area. And I find consistent in terms of its potential and the price growth here. So very affordable for investors and property buyers alike. And again, don't be put off by what you read in the paper about the car plants closing. People work in other industries other than that car manufacturing plant, and they're being placed elsewhere.
Yeah. So I know from our research, Kate, that this area of Adelaide is actually got the cheapest housing available anywhere in capital city Australia, and also the highest rental yields by far. You've got to get over that hump in your mind about it being down market. Once you get beyond that, you see the opportunities. I mean, where else in capital city Australia are the suburbs with median house prices below 200,000? Most of them are a little bit higher, but somewhere in the 200,000s is common for this area. That's right. And massive jobs nodes up there, as you mentioned.
Yeah.
The closure of the Holden car plant got a lot of publicity, but the actual fact, the positives up there far outweigh that negative. You've got, for example, the Edinburgh defence base, which has got more than $1 billion being spent on expansions right now. So you've got that and many other big employment nodes up there compensating for what was lost in the car plant.
Yeah, that's right. And there's something here for everyone in terms of property. So Salisbury being that little bit more established, Playford City, which is that the arrow, the green arrow at the top there. So which has some newer suburbs. It has all the Elizabeths. So yeah, you've got hospitals, private and public up there. You've got newer estates. You've got older properties. I would also argue some really good development potentials here for subdivisions. Good pricing. Again, you just need to do your viability calcs properly. But a very nice, diverse area up here, and as we said, very, very affordable. So moving swiftly on down a little bit further south of the city of Marion. This particular council area takes in a little bit of the sort of southern CBD and then takes us down here to Hallett Cove as well. I know you really like this area too, Terry. It continues to be one of the leaders in the promising Adelaide market and has really good, excellent long-term resilience, which you see in that growth chart, bottom right. The area has also overcome adversity, impact by the demise again of car manufacturing industry. It's reinvented itself in the industries of health, education, innovative technology. You've got around $2 billion in both private and government investing that's being spent on the redevelopment of the Tonsley precinct, which is leading to a new enterprises and job creation on the site of this former car manufacturing plant. It's quite extraordinary, again, what's going on there. New teaching hospital, university campuses are already in operation. We've got major transport projects which are improving the connectivity between freight hubs, seaports, creating further opportunities for businesses, offers very affordable properties, very low vacancy rates, and a number of suburbs have shown some good growth in median prices in the past year, with more expected in the near future. So, and long-term growth rates, as I say, have been very, very solid. A median house price of less than 400,000 and a median rent of around 350,000. So cash flows, again, pretty good here. What's not to love about this? you know?
It's wonderful value for money. I mean, this is really middle market Adelaide, but if you're talking middle market Melbourne or Sydney, you're talking suburbs where prices are in the 800,000s, some of them above $1 million.
Yes.
Many of the suburbs here are 400 and 500,000s. And then you've got those wonderful factors like the Tonsley precinct, which is a huge success story, and the nearby Flinders University and medical.
That's right.
So much going for it, and I just see this is one of the areas that's going to lead. Adelaide generally is going to surprise people with its performance. It's a growth city. a growth economy, and I think the city of Marion is going to lead that in terms of the Adelaide property market rising.
Agreed. And hot on its heels, we have just that little bit further down the Onkaparinga-shire. Talked about this area for a long time, but the area does have a very attractive seaside location. It's actually very popular with migrants because of that. It has a very good track record of steady price growth, above average rental yields, and is one of South Australia's strongest population growth areas. Again, we're a little bit limited when it comes to how the area can expand in terms of your competition, which is a good thing. You've got the extension of the rail links to Seaford, duplication of the Southern Expressway road into town, and these have both delivered faster access to Adelaide CBD and opened up the region. So you're looking at approximately 35 minutes into the CBD by road, 45 minutes by train. You've got work on the $620 million upgrade of the Darlington Expressway, which has begun. Council are fabulous here, actively courting investors and are using plans to revitalise the Noarlunga precinct with a $400 million redevelopment. Over the next 20 years or so, the region is expected to receive an influx of 48,000 additional residents, which, as we say, makes it one of Adelaide's strongest growth areas. And the biggest employers here are manufacturing, construction, retail, healthcare sectors. Again, it's very diverse, nice solid growth, low vacancy rates, which are consistently low. Median house price a little bit less than where we just were in Marion at around 360,000, but again, a good median rent of around 330 a week. An area like Marion, like, as we say, much of Adelaide, that I feel gets overlooked by most people. And there is such great opportunity here. Terry?
I agree. Onkaparinga keeps popping up in our research. Adelaide has this perception of being a city that doesn't have particularly high population growth. Well, this is one part of Adelaide that does. It's got that mix of bayside suburbs, new growth suburbs, and then you go a little bit further inland in this shire and you've got noted wine region. So it's got lifestyle elements as well as new suburbs, and it's growing strongly. It's got improved transport links, as you mentioned, to the centre of Adelaide. Very attractive pricing, low vacancy. So it's just one that's really worthy of consideration.
Yes. So really, that's the last area slide. I'll leave that up just for a second, but there's many other suburbs and areas that we could have talked about here, but we only have an hour and I do want to finish up so we have time for questions. So these aren't the only areas that I think are worthy of consideration. There's other areas in Adelaide. There are other areas in Perth, right? So there are other areas in Brisbane. So it's not really, our conclusion is that it is not all about Sydney and Melbourne. There are many opportunities out there which are completely overlooked, ignored by the media because they simply don't make great headlines. So, please know out there, everyone, that there are opportunities out there. There will always be opportunities out there. And as I said on one of the very earliest slides, it's not always about when you buy. When you buy is important, of course, but where. And at the moment, there is a profusion of opportunities out there. So these are just a few. It's a selection, okay? So my call to action for everyone right now is to give me a call. Free, no obligation chat, portfolio review. Just give me a call, send me an email. There are 3 of us on standby, really, all qualified property investment advisors, all fully licensed. I'm offering $500 off our full standard buyers agency service if you sign up with the code word hotspotting after attending this webinar. And if you've enjoyed listening, you found the information useful, please do follow us on Adviseable, follow me, Facebook and Instagram, because I'm putting up videos from my little field trips as well as other insights all the time, and all contact details are right there. So, Terry.
I'll just leave that on the screen. We'll go to some questions. And I'll just remind people out there watching, listening, type your question into the chat box or the Q&A panel if you prefer, and we'll try and zip through as many of these as we can in the time we have available. Ephraim is asking the question about Cessnock. We touched on the Hunter Valley region just outside Newcastle, which is I'm an investor in Cessnock. I haven't seen much growth lately. Any chance of growth in the near future? What do you think, Matt?
Well, I would say yes, there is a high chance. And I know those areas did struggle throughout the past few years because I think there's been a bit of an oversupply. The vacancy rate's quite high, rents didn't really grow, things did stagnate there a little bit. But as Terry and I both mentioned earlier on, these things are rippling, the growth, the opportunities are rippling out from both Sydney and Newcastle into these areas. And I think we're also seeing a recovery, an improvement in the resources sectors in those areas. I noted the other day the improvement in markets like Muswellbrook, which did go through a bit of those guys, anyone with property there has been through a bit of a tough time, I think, in the past few years. But I'm seeing very, very low vacancy rates there, and even indications of increases in sales figures, which will surely lead to price growth. And if it's happening in Muswellbrook, I'm absolutely sure that it will happen in Cessnock. Other areas, as you say, Singleton, Maitland, Rutherford, all those little, all those markets outside of Newcastle. Yes.
Yeah, it's certainly noticeable, Kate, the decrease in vacancies and also the uplift in sales activity in places like Muswellbrook and in Singleton, I've noticed. Sandra's asking what your opinion is of Gosford on the Central Coast, outside Sydney.
It's an interesting one. I would argue that many of the Central Coast markets have really, really had their own mini boom. I think it depends on the property type that you're buying in Gosford. I know that the council finally saw sense and decided to be a little bit more progressive, spend some money on infrastructure and improving things. But I think, to be honest, I think there's better opportunities elsewhere in terms of more immediate price growth.
Okay. Amanda is asking, sorry, the screen just moved. Where are you, Amanda? Why do you think Southeast Queensland has not grown in the past few years as many expected?
That's an excellent question, Terry.
I certainly have some thoughts on that. Yeah. I think it relates to the underlying economy. I think a lot of people have assumed that Brisbane would grow because Sydney and Melbourne did. Well, it doesn't work like that. What's relevant is what's going on primarily in your local economy, whereas the Sydney economy has been very strong, population growth very strong, big spending on infrastructure. Brisbane hasn't really had that. The Queensland economy has been lukewarm. Population growth data hasn't been as strong as in the past, although that's changing favourably again.
Absolutely.
And not much spending on infrastructure. But all those things are starting to change for Southeast Queensland, and I think we're going to see better performance because of that. I mean, the state budget in June had $50 billion worth of infrastructure spending over the next 4 years. If some of that happens, then we're going to see a better performance from Brisbane.
Yes, agreed. Everything that you said, I would have said it all relates to the economy, infrastructure spending, population growth. So, and I agree, all those things are changing when you look at the stats. I personally know of three people alone who've moved out of Sydney and up to Southeast Queensland just simply because of property pricing here and for a better lifestyle.
Yeah.
So.
Ben says, great webinar, but just curious why the Gold Coast is not on your list.
The Gold Coast. For all the reasons that I mentioned when I talked about the Sunshine Coast, really. Its lack of diversity. It is a magnet for developers oversupplying the area, and the fundamentals economically just don't support that happening. So it's a roller coaster ride for anyone who owns property there. It doesn't have the diversity of industry. So it's very reliant, it's a one-horse town when it comes to industry. It's reliant on tourism. There are certain markets, I'd say, inland, Coomera, Pimpama maybe, that do show more stable growth. But I'll be honest, it baffles me why people keep thinking that the Gold Coast is going to be this great performing market when it just never is, simply because of its ritzy strip of, the tourist strip there. But anyone I know that's bought there has been burned without fail.
And it just lurches from one oversupply scenario to another because of the high-rise market. And, the median price for an apartment in Surfers Paradise now is lower than it was 10 years ago. And I think that says a lot. Jason comments, Kate, you'll be delighted to hear this. Alex Dutt from your team at Adviseable was brilliant at helping my wife and I start an investment journey. That's just a comment that Jason has sent in. Linda is asking what you think of Mandurah, Western Australia, just a little bit south of Perth. Do you ever get there, Kate?
I do. I went there on my trip down south. Again, it's an interesting one. That my gut instinct says buy a little bit closer in if you can at the moment. But having said that, it's one of those markets that I think is improving. They are improving. It's one of the many shopping centres that's been expanded and improved. The local agents are all very bullish about that market. It does show great lifestyle advantages, has some good property prices. But I think it depends on your risk profile. If you've got a lot of time on your hands, I don't think it's necessarily wrong. But I also think that there are areas around that Mandurah area in new estates where there are a lot of properties for sale. I think that market still needs to stabilise. It doesn't give me a warm and fuzzy feeling in my gut, to be honest, at the moment.
Okay.
So they're technical.
Yes. Yes, Wynn is asking the question, what do you think about the Ipswich market? Should I continue to hold a few more years before selling?
Ipswich, definitely.
Yes.
Yeah, I would. Again, very bullish. The vacancy rates are really, really low. There's a great demand for rental property there. I'd be very cautious around the suburb, that brand new suburb that they're building at Ripley. Again, I'm hearing horror stories there for just the sheer amount of that the developers are selling those properties for, when across the freeway in Flinders View, Race View, what's the other one? Yamanto, you're paying $100,000 less for the same property. So it's the typical off the plan nightmare. I'd be cautious there. But Ipswich in itself, very stable, great population growth figures, diverse economy, good yields, good rental demands.
I agree with all of that, Kate, and the thing I would add to it is that the emergence of big jobs nodes there is the thing that I really like. It's got a RAF base just outside Ipswich.
Like our way.
And there's a lot of businesses out there that service that, and the RAF base is constantly expanding, billions of dollars being spent over time, and businesses that service that keep popping up. There's also the recently announced multi-billion-dollar contract to make vessels for the Army. Company called Ryan Metal got that contract. That's going to be happening in a new factory being built near that Goodna part of the Ipswich city, eastern end. There's things like that happening in Ipswich all the time. The land out there is cheap. The transport links are good, so businesses like to be established out there.
Right.
Miriam says, great seminar. What do you think of Townsville?
Townsville. I don't want to be too negative. Look, again, I guess investors there have been through a rough ride. I personally, I have not bought there for clients. I have found it very difficult one of the things we found difficult is making cash flow work, just because of the sheer amount of money you're paying in rates and insurance. Those two items alone can add up to $6,000-7,000. And that eats into people's cash flows. It is, you could argue it's recovering. Terry, I'll defer to you here. I think it's probably a market you know a little bit more about. But in overall, as to summarise about Townsville, most of my clients would be wary of it, to be honest.
I think it's a market that's going to come a lot stronger than it's been. It's been through a downturn period, Kate, but it's got... It's like a little bit like the Sunshine Coast. When I added up all the projects that are on the books, infrastructure and others, it's $24 billion worth. When that starts to happen, it's really going to generate something for Townsville, which is got economic diversity. It's got a lot going for it. the proviso is one that you mentioned, the insurance factor. But yeah, I think that's one to consider.
Yep. I know that state government, it's always slated as being, you know, Queensland's second capital, if you like. It does get good. It's always slated for good investment projects.
Yeah. Harry was asking what your thoughts on Wollongong and that general area south of Sydney. What do you think about that one, Kate?
Look, similar to the Central Coast. It's had a lot of growth. You'd be hard pushed to find a suburb that has not had 2-3 years of double-digit growth there, and I'd argue that the ship has sailed and that there are better opportunities elsewhere.
Yeah, I would tend to agree with that. That it's had a lot of growth. Kanwa is asking, hello Kanwa, I know you and I'm glad to see you watching and listening today. Is asking your predictions about Melbourne outer suburbs in the near future in terms of price growth and rental. I think you did mention it, touched on it very briefly earlier, Kate.
Yes, continue to be, I'd continue to be bullish about those. As I said in the presentation, you know, there are many more areas that we're looking at and that we're buying in. So Geelong, Werribee, round to the west would continue to attract my attention. Also round to the east, down towards Cardinia, Casey, City Council, Frankston, they've had really good growth though. But when you look at Victoria and the Melbourne area as a whole, it's number one in terms of the economy. It overtook New South Wales in the State of the State reports. It's the leader in terms of population growth and net migration, interstate net migration. So as well as people streaming up north to Brisbane, we're also streaming down south to Melbourne. So that puts pressure on property pricing, the need for rental properties. I think those markets will continue to be really, really strong, even though they have had good growth. But the thing I would say about those areas, again, not for everyone in terms of cash flow. So, you know, you're spending $550 and upwards, often, depends on the property, of course, and you might be getting $360, $380, maybe $400 a week in rent, depending on the property. So those kind of cash flows aren't everyone's cup of tea. So just, again, do your research, know what your risk profile is. Sorry.
The big factor for Melbourne is this phenomenal population growth. It's the population growth capital of Australia. They're not producing land fast enough really to keep up with that. So we're seeing some really strong growth in land prices and some of those outer suburbs, the northern outer suburbs, and also those ones heading south.
That's right.
Down towards Geelong.
And I think a good sign of that is when you look north of Melbourne towards Mernda, what's the other one? Just Whittlesea Council, those areas. There was, you could argue, quite an oversupply there, I'd say 3-4 years ago, with those off the plan scenarios of the properties being worth $100 grand less a year later, you know, after people had purchased them. That's now no longer the case. Those prices have come back and they're making money. You know, Mernda benefited from that, the train line extension that's gone up through Epping and into that area. Again, a lot of those areas that were oversupplied have recovered and are growing significantly. And as you say, the land prices are going up just as a reflection of that population growth. So again, good opportunities out there, I think. Down there, sorry, Melbourne.
All right, we're getting close to needing to wrap it up, Kate, but I'll just end with some general thoughts from both you and me about Hobart and Tasmania, because there have been a number of questions about Hobart and Tasmania. So let's end on that note. Do you think about those markets? Do you get to those markets ever, Kate?
Short answer, no. I think the window of opportunity for no longer. The window of opportunity for Hobart has gone. It did, well, let's be honest, it did nothing for 10 years and then had its own little mini boom. I think that time has passed. It has had really, really, really good growth. So we would not be present in that market or buying in that market.
Yeah. I've just been recently researching the latest numbers for Hobart. It's definitely, we actually predicted it was going to, perhaps 2.5 years ago, we're telling people it's going to come into this period of growth. That the price growth has been very strong, very affordable, still very low vacancies and good rental yields. But our latest numbers show that it's past its peak. It's still going to show some more price growth, but the rate of growth is going to start winding down. What's also happening there is that, as we've seen in some of the other states, that the growth has rippled out to some of the regional areas. So regional Tasmania right now is very strong. Launceston is still strong, and some of the other areas up in the north and northwest still going pretty well. But in terms of Hobart, the best time to buy there was a couple of years ago, and I think it's kind of past its peak, and we'll start to see it winding back a little bit.
Yeah, agreed. I think it would be a missed opportunity cost buying into this market at the moment.
Yeah. Okay, look, we do have more questions, and I apologise to everyone who's been typing in questions. We just don't have time to get to them all, but what I would suggest that we do, if there are markets that you'd like to ask about, contact Kate. The contact details are still on the screen with the mobile phone number and also the email address. You're also welcome to contact me, a writer at hotspotting.com.au. If you've got questions about locations, happy to answer those. Thanks to everyone who has watched and listened and participated and sent through your questions. I wish we had a little bit more time.
Me too, I do love it.
Yeah, we could talk all day, but we really do need to wind it up. A lot of people are out there in the lunch breaks and need to get back to work, or you should be getting back to work. But I'd just like to thank you, Kate, for another incredibly well-researched and informative presentation. You always do great presentations in these webinars, and the feedback we get from people is always so positive, and it's been coming through in the chat panels as well today, that people are really appreciating the quality of the information and the quality of the presentation. So thank you, Kate Hill from Adviseable. Let's do it again soon.
Yes, thank you, Terry, and thank you to everyone for your attention.
Okay, that's it for now. Thanks for participating. This is Terry Ryder from hotspotting.com.au signing off. We will do this again soon. Thanks for participating.